The chamber was vast, its domed ceiling lined with glowing alien runes, pulsating like slow, methodical breaths. The Galactic Council sat in a perfect circle, their robes stiff, their metallic masks reflecting the flames already licking at the edges of the pit. Silence ruled the air as the accused stood before them. She was human. Her dress, an odd contrast to the sterile, lifeless room, was adorned with red roses, a strange, almost poetic defiance in fabric form. The council members were unmoved. They had seen humans beg. They had seen them break. This one, however, stood still, chin high, ice cold. Grand Arbiter Kroll, a towering being with a face like polished bone, leaned forward. His voice dripped with disdain. You stand accused of consorting with the most violent, primitive race in the known universe. You, a mere human, dared to defy the Council's authority. Do you have anything to say before judgment is passed? She inhaled slowly. Around her, dozens of alien figures watched, some indifferent, some entertained, none sympathetic. You will regret this, she said. Murmurs spread like ripples in water. Kroll's mandibles clicked together, a mockery of a smile. Regret? You misunderstand the balance of power, creature. Your kind is insignificant. You are nothing. She didn't respond. She simply stared at them, her expression unreadable. A gong sounded. 2 guards in dark armor stepped forward, their clawed hands gripping ceremonial staffs that crackled with blue energy. The execution ritual was ancient. The council took pride in the old ways. A display of power, a warning to any species that dared defy them. The pit ignited. Fire surged upward, eager and hungry, licking at the metal grates. The heat shimmered in the air, casting distorted reflections across the chamber. The woman did not flinch. A low-ranking official, young and eager to impress, hesitated. Should we at least confirm her ties to the human military? Kroll waved a dismissive hand. It is irrelevant. She is human. That is enough. The guards removed her restraints. Push was all it took. She fell. The flames roared to meet her, consuming fabric, flesh, bone. She did not scream. Even as the fire took her, she remained standing. The council watched, expecting agony, expecting the usual final cries for mercy. But none came. Instead, her lips parted, and she uttered 2 words. He's coming. A hush spread across the chamber. Kroll's fingers tightened against his armrest. Others exchanged glances. Then silence. The fire crackled. The woman was gone. The execution was complete. A low-ranking official shifted uneasily. Who did she mean? Another scoffed. More human delusions. Kroll stood, gesturing to the council. This is the fate of those who challenge us. This is. A deep rumble cut through his words. It was distant, but unmistakable. The ground trembled. Faintly, barely, but enough. Kroll frowned. He glanced at his advisors. What was that? No one answered. Across the chamber, a small terminal blinked red. An incoming transmission. Unusual. The council's capital was impenetrable, its defenses unmatched. No unauthorized signals could breach their networks. And yet, one of the masked officials hesitated before activating it. The screen crackled to life. No image, only audio. A voice, cold, measured, unshaken. We burn the stars. The transmission cut off. The council chamber remained silent. Even the flames seemed to dim. Kroll exhaled, slow and controlled. A meaningless threat. But his fingers tapped against the armrest. Uneasy. Far beyond the council planet, deep in the void of space, something stirred. The bridge of the warship was silent. A single red light pulsed on the console, waiting to be acknowledged. General Ethan Voss stood motionless, staring at it. The message had arrived hours ago, but he hadn't touched it. Not yet. He already knew. Around him, officers watched, waiting for their commander to move. None spoke. The air was thick with something they had never seen in him before. Not hesitation, not fear, something deeper, Voss exhaled through his nose and pressed the playback. The hologram flickered to life. The resolution was poor, intercepted footage. Distorted, unstable, but clear enough. The woman in the fire. His wife. Her dress. Her stance. Her words. He's coming. The flames swallowed her whole. The feed ended. A long silence followed. The officers shifted uneasily. They had fought under Voss for years. They had seen him dismantle fleets, outmaneuver armadas, burn entire planets to stop an invasion before it began. They had seen him break enemies without breaking stride. But this was different. Voss reached up and removed the insignia from his uniform, setting it gently on the console. The meaning was clear. This was no longer about command, no longer about strategy. This was personal. He turned. "Get me the fleet." The officers snapped to attention. No orders needed. They moved. Alarms blared. Engines roared to life. The ship trembled as its course was set. A low voice broke through the noise. "Sir, authorization from High Command." "I wasn't asking." The officer stiffened, nodded, and relayed the order. Across the vast expanse of human-controlled space, a signal pulsed through encrypted channels. A call not for war, but for vengeance. Human fleets, long restrained by fragile peace, began to move. Silent, focused, unstoppable. Voss walked to the observation deck, watching the stars shift as they accelerated. His reflection stared back at him, eyes hollow. His hands curled into fists. The council thought humanity was weak, thought they were primitive, thought their laws, their rituals, their power meant something. They were about to learn. The Galactic Council's military division received the first reports within hours. Unusual human fleet activity. Warships breaking from defensive positions. A shift in encrypted communications. Mere anomalies at first. Then, a report came in from the outer sectors. An entire listening post gone. No distress call. No wreckage. Just silence. The Council's military strategist, a reptilian being with decades of experience in interstellar warfare, dismissed it as an accident. Until the second report. Then the third. Human ships were moving. Not in formation. Not in the predictable patterns of routine exercises. They were ghosts, slipping through trade routes, cutting off supply lines, severing relay stations. A calculated, methodical dissection of the Council's reach. When the first Council warship encountered them, it barely had time to register the attack before it was reduced to debris. No warning. No communication. Just destruction. The Council finally convened, their voices frantic, overlapping. The humans were retaliating. Not with protests. Not with diplomacy. With silence and fire. The Council leader slammed a fist onto the table. Deploy the fleet. The order was sent. Armadas mobilized. Defenses were raised. The capital world, once a beacon of control, became a fortress. And still the humans did not speak. Voss stood at the holodeck, watching the battlefield unfold in real time. Every move, every strike, executed with brutal efficiency. His officers relayed updates. Enemy fleets scattering, planetary defenses crumbling, command structures collapsing. The Council was reacting exactly as he had predicted. Bureaucratic, slow, predictable. He turned to his second-in-command. "How long until we reach the capital?" 3 hours. Voss nodded. A young officer hesitated. "Sir." "The Council is requesting a diplomatic summit." A pause. Then Voss smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "They think this is about negotiations." The officer swallowed. "What should I tell them?" Voss looked back at the holodeck. The Council's capital world flickered in the display, surrounded by defenses they believed would save them. He turned away. "Tell them nothing." The officer relayed the message. The humans continued forward. No response. No demands. No mercy. The war had already been won. Now came the reckoning. The Council chamber was in chaos. The once mighty rulers of the galaxy stood in frantic debate, their voices layered with panic. The war had lasted less than a week, yet their fleets were in ruins, their defenses shattered, and their allies silent. The humans had not responded to any transmissions. No ultimatums. No negotiations. Just destruction. Grand Arbiter Kroll paced, his claws clicking against the floor. They were supposed to be insignificant. His voice was low, strained. Primitive. An advisor, his breathing shallow, whispered, "We underestimated them." Kroll turned sharply. "We executed one human. One. And they—" He gestured wildly to the holographic map of their dying empire, filled with blinking red alerts. "Burned everything." Another official slammed a fist onto the table. "We must surrender." Murmurs spread. Surrender. To humans. It was unthinkable yet unavoidable. The alternative was extinction. A transmission alert pulsed on the central display. A single message, received across every surviving council relay. They all turned to look. A simple text. "We are here." Silence fell over the room. Kroll swallowed. "Open a channel." The main screen flickered. Static. Then clarity. General Ethan Voss. He stood on the bridge of a warship, his face void of expression, his eyes like frozen stone. Behind him, the wreckage of council vessels drifted through space. He had not come to speak. He had come to watch. Kroll forced his voice to remain steady. "General Voss, you burned my wife alive." The words cut through the room. Simple. Cold. Absolute. Kroll hesitated. "She was a criminal. She was a message." Voss interrupted, his tone unchanged. "You wanted to show the galaxy what happens when humans defy you." He took a step closer to the display. "Now they know." Kroll opened his mouth, but no words came. The weight of it all settled over him. This was not war. It was something older, deeper. This was vengeance sharpened to a perfect edge. Another transmission came through, this one intercepted from orbit. Council defense fleets were abandoning their posts, some defecting, others fleeing into deep space. The capital stood alone. Kroll forced himself to speak. "What do you want?" Voss tilted his head slightly. "Want?" He almost laughed. Almost. For years, the Council had seen humanity as nothing more than an anomaly, a lesser species barely worthy of recognition. They had dismissed them as weak, emotional, disorganized. And now, here they were, at the gates. Voss's expression didn't change. "We don't want anything." The room tensed. Voss raised a hand. "You took everything from me." His fingers curled into a fist. "So I'm returning the favor." A low tremor shook the chamber. The walls vibrated. The council members looked around in confusion. Then the alarm sounded. One of the officials scrambled to a console, his voice panicked. "Orbital bombardment detected." A deafening roar drowned out the rest. The sky split open. Fire rained down. Explosions bloomed across the capital, consuming the towering structures, the once grand avenues, the monuments to power. The council chamber's reinforced walls trembled under the assault. The lights flickered. The ceiling groaned. Kroll turned back to the screen, desperation creeping into his voice. "You can't do this." Voss watched, unmoving. "You already did." The signal cut. Above the planet, human warships unleashed their fury. Precision strikes. No escape. No mercy. The Council's reign ended in fire, just as it had begun. In the final moments, Kroll understood. It had never been about war. It had always been about consequences. The fires still burned. What was once the seat of power for the Galactic Council was now rubble and ash. The sky choked with the smoke of fallen towers. The streets, once filled with dignitaries and soldiers, lay in ruin, bodies scattered where they had fallen. The planet's defenses had crumbled within hours. What remained of the Council's forces had surrendered or vanished into the void, unwilling to face what came next. The last transmission from the capital had been a single, fragmented distress call. No one had answered. No one would. A lone warship descended through the atmosphere, cutting through the haze of destruction. It moved with purpose, its presence a final declaration that the war was over. Humanity had come, and now there was only silence. Inside the ruined council chamber, The few surviving officials huddled in the dim light. The chamber, once a grand hall of judgment, was now a tomb. The bodies of their fallen leaders lay where they had died, crushed beneath the weight of their own arrogance. The remaining council members clung to the last vestiges of their authority, their robes torn, their pride shattered. A sound echoed through the chamber, the steady, deliberate footsteps of boots against stone. The council members turned, their breath catching as a figure emerged from the shadows. General Ethan Voss. He walked slowly, unarmed, his expression unreadable. Behind him, a handful of human soldiers stood at attention, their faces hidden behind the dark visors of their helmets. They did not speak. They did not need to. Voss stopped at the center of the chamber. His gaze swept over the survivors, taking in the fear, the desperation, the silent pleading in their eyes. He let the moment stretch, let them feel the weight of their own downfall. One of the remaining counselors, a frail, trembling figure, stepped forward. Please, there must be terms. There must be something. Voss's voice cut through the air like a blade. There were terms. The counselor swallowed hard. We acted in accordance with our laws. Voss's expression did not change. So did we. Silence. Another council member, his voice breaking, whispered, "Will you kill us?" Voss tilted his head slightly, considering. Then he shook his head. No. A flicker of hope passed through the council members, but it faded as Voss took a slow step forward. Death is mercy. His voice was quiet, steady. And mercy is something you never gave. He turned slightly, gesturing toward the ruins beyond the chamber. You built an empire on fear, on control. You thought yourselves untouchable, above consequence. His gaze locked onto them. But you were wrong. The counselor who had spoken first took a shaky breath. What happens now? Voss looked past them, out through the shattered walls of the chamber, to the burning city beyond. His voice was calm, final. Now, you live with what you've created. He turned without another word, walking back toward the exit. His soldiers followed, silent as ghosts. They did not look back. The council members remained where they stood, watching as the last human presence vanished from their ruined chamber. No orders were given, no executions carried out, because there was nothing left to destroy. The war was over, but the lesson would never be forgotten. The galaxy did not recover overnight. The fall of the Galactic Council sent ripples through every system, every colony, every species that had once looked to them for leadership, for order. What had been seen as an unshakable force had collapsed in fire and silence, leaving only the remnants of an empire built on arrogance. The survivors of the Council's world scattered. Some sought refuge in the distant fringes of space, hoping to evade the gaze of those who had once feared them. Others, stripped of power and influence, faded into obscurity, nameless figures in a galaxy that no longer acknowledged them. But the scars remained. Worlds that had once lived under the Council's rule now faced a choice: rebuild or perish. The infrastructures they had depended on were gone. Supply lines severed, governance erased. Chaos threatened to consume entire sectors. Without the firm hand of the Council, warlords rose from the shadows, remnants of old regimes grasping at the last fragments of control. Yet through it all, the humans did not occupy. They did not claim the ruined capital, did not install rulers, did not dictate terms. They had come, they had destroyed, and then they had left, like a storm that reshaped the landscape and vanished into the void. Some saw it as restraint, others a warning. For humanity did not need to rule. The message had already been delivered. In the quiet aftermath, whispers of their actions spread across the stars. Empires took notice. Species that had once dismissed humans as lesser beings now spoke their name with careful reverence. Treaties were rewritten, borders redefined, not out of conquest but out of understanding, because they had seen what happened when humanity was wronged, and none wished to test them again. On a distant world, far from the ruins of the Council, Ethan Voss stood alone on the surface of a quiet moon. The war was over, The council was broken, but there was no victory in his eyes, no triumph in his stance. Only absence. The wind stirred the dust around him, carrying echoes of a life that had been stolen, a name that had been burned into the void, a voice that would never speak again. He closed his eyes, listening to the silence. Some wounds never healed. Some wars never ended. Not in the way that mattered. A voice called his name from behind, one of his officers waiting. The fleet was ready to move. The battle was over, but the future remained unwritten. Voss turned, casting one last look at the stars before stepping away. He had delivered justice, but justice was never enough.